Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome. Today we are covering as-su'al or huruf al-istifham. These are question articles, so how do we ask questions? And this is part of lesson 1. Okay, so we're still going over lesson 1 in Al-Kitaab, and this is the next sort of grammar lesson that we have. As-su'al, how do we ask questions? Bil-fusha, in fusha. Okay, so in modern standard Arabic. So a couple of things. We call these interrogatives. Interrogatives are question articles or question particles, as your book likes to call them, and they're used for asking informational questions, right? So seeking information about where do you live and what do you do and do you like this and are you a student and all those types of things, right? Asking informational questions in Arabic is pretty straightforward, and it's pretty similar to the structure in English. There are some differences, which we're going to go over, but it is pretty much standard in terms of the way that we ask questions in English. Okay? The only thing that is different is that in Arabic, and particularly in modern standard Arabic, in Fusha, the question articles, or what we call huruf al-istifham, those question articles, always start the sentence. So they're always going to be at the beginning of the sentence. Okay? There are some dialects that use question articles at the end of the sentence. So for instance, in Egyptian dialect, they always put it at the end, right? But we're only focusing on modern standard. And in modern standard, they're going to go in the beginning. And then question articles can also be paired with prepositions, right? So, and those are questions like, in English, if I said, in which city do you live? Or which city do you live in, right? So in is the preposition. So when you have a preposition with your question, you're going to start with the preposition and then the question article and then the rest of the sentence. Okay? So if you were to say, which street do you live on, right? In English, on would be at the end. That's the preposition. We would say, on which street? And in Arabic, we use the word fi. So in which street do you live? Okay, so the question article is always at the beginning of the sentence unless you have a preposition. Then it'll be preceded by the preposition. So let's move first, and we are going to look at some of those prepositional phrases with the questions. If you have your book, افتح الكتاب. احنا الآن في صفحة We're on page صفحة 10. So page 10 and 11 in your book, and you can look at those charts that are there. So on page 10, you have the chart of questions that have the question article with a preposition, and then the rest of the question articles في صفحة 11. So on the next page 11. So let's look at the first couple that we have. من أين? من أين? From where? From where? من أين? Let's look at the examples. من أين أنت? Easiest one. من أين أنت? So if I want to say, where are you from? From is a preposition. In English, we put it at the end. In Arabic, it goes to the beginning. From is min. So we're going to put min in the beginning of the sentence. Min, from, أين, where? From where, أنت, are you? And one thing that's important to note, and we've talked about this very briefly in previous lessons, is that in Arabic, we don't use the being verb the same way we use them in English. So words like is and are, we're not going to use them. They're not going to translate as to a separate word. It's just assume that that's in the meaning of the sentence. So min aina, from where, anta, you. The are is simply implied. From where are you? It's just assuming. So when you see a question article and you're translating it into English and you're trying to understand how to do that, just assume that the question article in Arabic will include that being verb. There's no separate word for it. Okay? Min aina anta? Where are you from? والبنت, if you're talking to a girl or a woman, min aina anti? So notice here, notice here on the top, the fatha will go on top. If you're talking to a man, min aina anta? And if you want to just stop it and say min aina ant, you could do that. And then for a woman, anti, just a kasra. Okay, so put a kasra underneath it. Min aina anti? Where are you from? So then the response would be أنا, as I'm the person answering, if you're asking me, من أين أنت? أنا من, I'm from, and then whatever the place. Okay. أنا من أمريكا. أنا من مدينة Detroit. أنا من مصر. أنا من السودان. Right? So wherever you're from, من, from. It's going to go at the end. Okay, let's look at another example. من أين, from where? والدك. والدك. This is really good because this is showing us examples of attached pronouns, which we saw in the review video. Okay. والدك. ما معنى والد? ما معنى? What is the meaning of والد? والد, father. If I say والدك, what is this kaf at the end? That's a prepositional ending that we're adding there. And whose father are we talking about? From where is, again, we're applying the word is here. والدك, your father. Okay. Now, what's the difference here? من أين والدك? من أين والدك? What's the difference between these two? من أين والدك في فتحة. من أين والدك في كسرة. What's the difference? والدك, the kaf here is masculine and the ki is feminine. So that depends on who you're asking. It depends on the gender of the person that you're asking. So if you're going to ask someone who is male, a man or a boy, من أين والدك? Where's your dad from? The your is masculine. If you're going to ask a woman, من أين والدك? That ki is because she is feminine. والدك. Some people have a question of, well, what do we do for gender neutral pronouns? We do have gender neutral pronouns. There's not a specific pronoun that you can use, but it's the same thing that is done often in English where they and them becomes the gender neutral. And we haven't done that plural yet, but it would be kum. من أين والدكم? Okay, so the kum, it would mean you all. It's you plural, right? So if you wanted a gender neutral pronoun, you could use that. من أين والدك? من أين والدك? Where is your dad from? Okay, and the next one, how would you say, where is your mom from? Where is your mother from? Notice here the word walid is father. We learned this in the vocab lesson. That mother is simply the word walid with a ta' marbuta at the end, walida. And when you attach something to that ta' marbuta, you pronounce it with a T. You have the regular ta' here, it's ta' maftuha. We open the ta' so that we can connect the kaf. من أين والدتك? من أين والدتك? نفس الشيء. It's the same thing here. So if you're talking to someone who's male, من أين والدتك? If I'm talking to George, يا George, meaning, oh George, I'm referring to him. من أين والدك? يا مريم, if I'm referring to Maryam. من أين والدتك? If I'm saying your mother, or والدك if I'm talking about your father. Okay, so there's two components here. You're looking at the word here, walid or walida, so mother, father, and then the masculine and the feminine pronoun referring to the person whose mother you're talking about or the person whose father you're talking about. Okay, من أين والدتك? من أين والدتك? If you don't want to pronounce the haraka on the end, if it feels like a bit of a tongue twister, you can end it with a sukun. You can say من أين والدتك? Right? Or if you wanted, we talked about this in the lesson, that some dialects do this and some people in modern standard, it's not necessarily modern standard, but people are just adopting it because it's easier, that if you want to pronounce this fatha on the kaf, if you want to pronounce it on the ta, min aina walidatak and walidatik, you could do that, but it's not completely accurate formally. Okay, so if you want to do that, that is an option, but it isn't complete fatha. Okay. من أين هذا الكتاب? من أين هذا الكتاب؟ هذا الكتاب من المكتبة. من المكتبة. هذا الكتاب. هذا this. So this book. هذا الكتاب من المكتبة. يعني من المكتبة, from the library. مكتبة can also mean the bookstore. Okay. من أين. So what I would suggest is pause after each slide and try to come up with a question for yourself. Okay, so use that question article and try to come up with the question. Okay. في أي. ما معنى في? What is في? In. Good. أي, which. Okay. في أي, in which. In which. Okay. So in English, proper English, if you did it in Old English and traditional English, we would have said in which in a sentence, right? It's the same thing. But a lot of times now in speech, we say which and in at the end, right? Which class are you in, right? Which car are you sitting in? Okay. Which city do you live in? We tend to put the in at the end. But remember, in the first slide I said in the preposition, if you have a preposition with the question, the preposition goes before the question article. So that's why we're going to say fi ay, in which works out in proper English as well. So anytime you have that kind of question and you're thinking about how to translate it, put it together as in which. في أي. في أي صف أنت. في أي صف أنت or أنتِ. In which class, remember there's no word for are, in which class? You, meaning are you. Okay? في أي صف. في أي صف أنت. Okay? الجواب in the answer, you're just replacing it with yourself. أنا في صف, I'm in the class, which class? اللغة العربية. Okay? Arabic language, اللغة العربية. Okay. في أي مدينة. So in which, what is Medina? في أي مدينة? City. So in which city تسكن. في أي مدينة تسكن, you live. So in which city do you live? That do that you use in English. Do is just the question article way, right, of taking the being verb, is or are. Okay. So anytime you see do, you're going to ignore that unless it's at the very beginning of the question. We're going to come back to that in a few slides. في أي مدينة. So in which city you live. In which city, implying do you live. في أي مدينة تسكن. في أي مدينة تسكنين. What's the difference? هل يوجد فرق بين تسكن وتسكنين? What's the difference between these two? تسكن مذكر. مذكر is masculine. We're going to be talking about this in a future lesson. تسكنين is feminine. مؤنث. So مذكر is masculine. مؤنث is feminine. Those terms we'll come back to. But what's important is when you look at the verbs themselves, can you recognize the difference? Notice they both start with ta, meaning they're both second person talking to someone. When you add the ya nun, it's the feminine. So I'm talking to a woman. Okay. في أي مدينة تسكن. في أي مدينة تسكنين. في أي شارع. ما معنى شارع? شارع is a street. Okay. So in which street? So in English we say on which street. I live on Ford Road, for instance, right? But باللغة العربية نقول في أي شارع. In which street? You use the word in. Okay, so instead of on. في أي شارع. In which street تسكن. In which street do you live? في أي شارع تسكن. في أي شارع تسكنين. So for each of these, answer it for yourself. Answer the question. في أي شارع تسكنين. أسكن. So you would change that because it's تسكن, it's you. How do I say I live? أنا أسكن. ألف همزة. We start it with ألف همزة. أسكن في شارع Ford. شارع Chase, whichever street it is that you live on. Okay, we're going to continue on. مع من. مع من. مع means with, usually with people. مع من. ما معنى من? What is من? We did this in the vocab lesson. من هو? من هي? Who? مع من? With who or with whom. Okay? With whom. So notice, same thing. Formal English, with whom is the way that we ask, right? With whom are you? With whom do you live? Right? But now in speech, people say, who do you live with? And we put with at the end. But بالفصحى, in standard Arabic, we're going to put the with at the beginning of the sentence. مع من تسكن? مع من تسكنين? With whom, there's that do again, do you live? With whom you live, meaning with whom do you live? It's the question. مع من تسكن? مع من تسكنين? الجواب, the answer. أنا أسكن. Remember, you're changing it for yourself. This dot here, we're changing it to ألف همزة. أنا أسكن, or if you just want to say أسكن, أسكن مع زوجي. مع زوجي. زوج, husband. مع زوجي وابني. Ibn is son, وابني. So وابني وابني. Okay? And my son. مع من تدرس. مع من تدرسين العربية. With whom do you study العربية, Arabic? أدرس مع أستاذة تزيين. Okay? مع من تدرس. So now try to come up with a sentence of your own, a question of your own using مع من. So those right there, في أي, من أين, مع من, these three are the question articles that we have with prepositional phrases. Okay, so now let's move on and let's just do the one word question articles. These aren't all of them, there's a couple more, but these are the ones that we're focusing on in lesson 1. Okay, ما, what. Okay, this is now نحن الآن في صفحة 11, page 11. ما, what. Now the thing to note in Fusha is there's 2 words for the word, for the meaning of what. Okay, one of these we use with nouns, which is this one, ma, and the second one, which is in the next slide, we use with verbs. So that's why I have a note here that ma is generally used with nouns, what is or what are. Okay, and you have a noun after it. Okay, so let's look at an example. Ma ismuka. Ma ismuki. What is, here's the scaf again, your name. Okay, and what you can do, and we covered this a little bit in last semester, if you took pre-elementary Arabic, is that there are some words like the word ism and like the word ibn, which I used in the last slide, where the alif, right here, that alif is actually what we call hamzat al-wasl. It's a hamza in which you don't write the hamza, and you can skip over it. So if you have a word that's before, you can skip that alif and just connect it to the next letter. Okay? So instead of saying ma ismuka, you can take the ma sound and simply, if I'm drawing an arrow, pretend I'm drawing an arrow from this to the scene, you can connect it masmuka, which is the same reason why instead of saying what ibni and my son, I could say wabni. Okay? And ibn is a new word. We'll learn that in a little bit. So ma ismuka, masmuka, masmuki. Okay, what's your name? And this doesn't happen with tons of words, but the ones that we've done in our vocab so far is ism. That's where you'll see this sort of connection happen. Masmuka, what's your name? Masmuka. When you're answering, ismi. So when you're answering, you're not putting the word ma in it, right? Because we're not asking a question when you're answering. I'm not saying what my name is. I'm not saying what my name is Tazeen. No, I'm just saying my name is. Ismi Tazeen. Okay. ما هذا. ما هذا. What is this? Implies the is. Notice the words after ma, these are all nouns. ما هذا. هذا كتاب. ما هذا. هذا قلم. ما هذا. ما هذا. هذا iPad. ما هذا. ما هذه ما هذه ما هذه هذه طاولة طاولة table. Okay. So what is this? What is this? Feminine and masculine. Okay. You never want to use that with a person. What is this to a person? Right? It's for things. We're using this for nouns. ما معنا. Ma'ana is meaning, which you should have heard me say a few times in this video already. ما معنا. What the meaning of something. Basically, you're saying what's the meaning. And notice, what's is what is, right? That is an, again, there's no substituting for that word. You just ignore it. We don't translate it. Okay, so there's no separate word. So what's the meaning? ما معنا قلم. So what's the meaning of قلم? ما معنا قلم. قلم يعني pen. Okay? So ما معنا. When you have a question, you want to ask me a question, what's the meaning of ما معنا bathroom? What's the meaning? What's the bathroom? Hammam, right? So if you want to ask in English or in Arabic, asking me what certain words are, that's how you'll do it. ما معنا. What does it mean? What's the meaning of? And then nothing. Okay, so the second word that means what is ماذا. Notice they both have ma alif, mim alif in it. Okay, ma for nouns, ماذا. We're going to use ماذا generally with verbs, with actions. So it's going to be ماذا and some sort of verb. Okay, so what do you do? That's an action. Okay, what do you want to eat? That's an action. Okay. What do you study? Study is an action. So anytime you have a verb after what, we're using ماذا. So let's look at the examples. ماذا تدرس? ماذا تدرسين? What do you تدرس? Study. And the response, أدرس. أدرس, I study. أدرس العربية. Okay. ماذا تحب؟ ماذا تحبين؟ ماذا تحب? What do you love? ماذا تحب؟ ماذا تحبين؟ أنا أحب قطتي. قطتي نائمة. My cat's sleeping. What do I love? My cat. أنا أحب ابني. So what do you love? Notice again, do. There's no work. We're not using it. ماذا يعمل والدك? So this one we're making it a little bit longer here. Okay. ماذا يعمل, and I'm going to add here the تشكيل والدك, or you can have key here. Okay. Okay. Again, just so you see the حركات. ماذا يعمل? So in the first two, they were ماذا تدرس ماذا تحب. There was a ta, meaning I'm talking to you. Now I'm asking in the third person. ماذا يعمل? يعمل. What is يعمل? He works. ماذا يعمل والدك? والد is father. If I say والدك, or if you're a woman and I say والدك, your father. So here I want you to put a note for yourself that when you're asking a question with ماذا, it's an action. And it's in third person, it's about someone else. The verb will come first. Okay? So the structure is the question article, the verb, and then the subject, whoever person you're asking about. So if I want to say, what does your dad do? Meaning, what does he do for a living? What's his work? Right? So what does he do? You're going to put what first, ماذا. The action here is to do or to work, which is يعمل. It has to be with a ya because it's masculine. It's about your father. So it has to be in third person, it has to be masculine. ماذا يعمل. Then we say والد, father, and then we add the yours at the end of that. والدك. والدك. Okay. So if I'm talking to George, ماذا يعمل والدك? If I'm talking to Maryam, ماذا يعمل والدك? Notice the verb stays exactly the same because we're still asking about father. He's still masculine, right? The only thing that's changing is the ka or the ki. It's whose father am I referring to? I'm referring to George's father, والدك, your father. والدك, your father if you're referring to someone who's a woman. Okay, how about if we want to ask about your mom? ماذا تعمل? So now we're adding a ta here because it's feminine. I'm asking about your mom. ماذا تعمل والدتك? So notice here, والدة, this word right here, that is mother. And then we add the kaf to the end. So والدة is mother, that kaf is your mother. ماذا تعمل والدتك? ماذا تعمل والدتك? ماذا تعمل والدتك? ماذا تعمل والدتك? ماذا. So you're going to try to come up with a question with ماذا. Okay, moving on. أي. أي. Which. Which. أي كتاب هذا? أي كتاب هذا? Which book is this? Remember the is implied. Which book is this? أي كتاب? كتاب العربية. Okay. أي. أي. أي صف عندك? Which class عندك? You have. عندك, عندك, a or I, depending on your gender. أي صف عندك? Which class do you have? Okay. Which. Okay. من. We saw this one in the vocab. من. Who. Okay. Who. So, let's look at some questions. من هو. We already have done this. من هو. You guys saw slides. من هو. هو Obama. من هي. Here, Beyonce. We had different famous people, and you guys had to say who it was. من هو, who is he? من هي. Okay. So who, when you're referring to a person, asking a question about a person. من, who. من الأستاذة. من الأستاذة, who is the teacher? من. الأستاذة هي أستاذة تزيين. من, who. And notice here, من is a gender-neutral question article. All the question articles are gender-neutral. So it doesn't matter if you have a masculine word or a feminine word after it. Okay? So it could have been من الأستاذ, who's the teacher. من الأستاذة can be feminine or masculine. طيب, من يعمل في المكتبة? Now what's important to know is when you're asking a question with who, and it's a general question, you don't know the gender of the person. You're just saying, who is working here, right? Who works? من يعمل, who works in المكتبة, the library or the bookstore. Whenever you have that type of question, and it's a general question of who does something, the does something, okay, that word has to always be in the huwa form, the third person masculine form. That's the default form, okay? So anytime you see man with a verb, it's always going to be starting with a ya. The verb will always start with a ya. Okay, من يعمل, who works. من يعمل في المكتبة. If I asked in the class, I'm asking the class, من يعمل. من منكم يعمل. Who from amongst you guys? Who works? That's a general open-ended question, right? I'm not asking about someone specific. So in that case, it's always third person. It's always the third person masculine. يعمل. It'll start with a ya. Okay. من يعمل في المكتبة. من لا يعمل. من لا يعمل. Who doesn't work? Right? من يحب القهوة. من يحب القهوة. Who loves coffee? So if I had a whole class of you in front of me and I said, من يحب القهوة? You raise your hand. أنا أحب القهوة. أو أنا لا أحب القهوة. طيب من يحب الشاي? من يحب الشاي? Who likes tea? Right? من يدرس العربية. من يدرس العربية. أنت. صح؟ أنت. So who studies Arabic? You do. So من, who. أين, you saw this. We said من أين was from, أين was where. So أين by itself is where. أين أنت? You're supposed to meet up with your buddy and you text them, where are you? They're not there. أين أنت? Where are you? أين أنت? أين أنت? أنت أنت أنت. أين تسكن? أين تسكنين? Where do you live? So I could answer أسكن في. Okay, it's usually going to be في with your answer. أين يسكن? So now we're doing a third person. أين يسكن? How do you know it's third person? Good, the ya. أين يسكن والدك? So where does he live? Your father. So where does your father live? So the same rule that we saw with ماذا is going to happen here. If you have a verb and you're asking about someone else, the verb comes first. The action always comes right after the question article, and then the subject, whoever's doing it, will come after that. أين يسكن والدك? أين يسكن والدك? Remember again, masculine, feminine, the ka or the ki, fatha or the kasra, depending on whose father. Are you talking to your friend whose name is John, whose name is Muhammad, who's Ahmad? Or are you talking to your friend who is Maryam or Fatima or Khadija, someone who's a woman? Waliduka, waliduki. Okay, how about if I want to ask about someone who's a woman? Aina taskun, ta, we're starting here with ta. Where does she work? Or where does she live? Aina taskun. Aina taskun. Where does she live? Who are we talking about? Walidatuka. Where does your mom live? So it's the feminine verb because we're talking about your mom. Aina taskun walidatuka. Aina taskun walidatuki. So you're going to come up with your own. Aina. Kaifa. Kaifa means how. Easiest one that you've done. Everyone knows. كيف الحال? How are you? كيف أنت? كيف الحال? حال literally means your situation, your state. Your state. How are you doing? It's literally asking the being, the state of your being. How is that? كيف الحال? كيف الجو? جو is weather. كيف الجو? كيف الفيلم? How's the movie? How? كيف. Okay, last one that we're going to cover. هل. Now, هل, I want you to think of, translates here as do, does, is, or are. Whenever you start a question with do, does, is, or are. So this being verb, we don't use the being verb, right, if it's in the middle of a sentence. But if you want to start your question with a being verb, meaning that question is a yes or no question. So any kind of question that you're asking in which the answer is either yes or no. So I put here yes, na'am, or no, la. Na'am, la, la. So if you're asking a question in which the answer is yes or no, it will always start with hal. That's the rule. Okay, hal. So let's look at some examples. هل أنت طالب? هل أنت طالب? Meaning, are you a student? It's a yes or no question. نعم أنا طالب. لا لست طالب. So it's yes or it's no. هل أنت طالبة؟ نعم أنا طالبة. Right? So in this case, you're asking a yes or no question. Are you a student? So think of it this way. Either you think of it as a yes or no question, it's a yes or no question, and that hal is used for sentences in which we start with do or does or is or are. هل أنت مغربي? Are you مغربي, Moroccan? هل أنت مغربية? Are you Moroccan? This is, remember, the nisba adjective that we did, and it's the feminine version. مغربية. Okay? مغربي, مغربية. Okay, so let's look at some more examples with hal. How about when we want to use it with the verb? Okay, with the verb, it's going to have that meaning of do. هل تحب القهوة? هل تحبين القهوة? So here we're asking, do you like or you love coffee? So So remember, we have the masculine, and then I put the feminine here. هل تحب القهوة? Or the feminine, هل تحبين القهوة? هل تحب القهوة؟ نعم أحب القهوة. لا لا أحب القهوة. هل تحب هذا الصف؟ هل تحب هذا الصف؟ ما معنى هذا الصف؟ This صف, class. هل تحبين هذا الصف? I hope so. هل تسكن في ديربورن؟ هل تسكن في ديربورن? So, do you live in Dearborn? So it's that yes or no question. هل تعملين? If it was masculine, هل تعمل? Do you work? So when you see هل and it's with a verb, it's generally do. Okay? And then do or does. If I do in English, we use it for second person. If it was does, so if I said هل يعمل, does he work? Right? So do or does, usually with the verb. And then if it is like this with a noun, it has that meaning of is or are when you're starting a question with is or are. Okay, so now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some examples. Pause the video, and then you're going to see if you can come up with the question. In which area in Detroit do you live? Okay, so we have here in which. So in is fi, which is a. That was one of those prepositional phrases that we use with the question. في أي area, ما معنى area? What is area? That was one of our new vocab words. منطقة. في أي منطقة. So في أي منطقة in Detroit. في أي منطقة في Detroit. So in which area in Detroit? تسكن. If it's feminine, تسكنين. يا نون at the end. So notice if you have do in the middle of a sentence, just ignore it. You're not translating that. If it's in the middle of a sentence, there's no word for it. So don't throw هل in the middle of the sentence. في أي منطقة في ديربورن تسكن. Okay, do you have a brother or sister in the same university? And I'm using vocab words that we've done for in the vocab list, المفردات, in this chapter. Okay, do you have? So if I'm starting the question with do, and the answer here is going to be a yes or no, then what do we have to start with? It's هل. Okay, هل you have. So to have, that word is عند, and you add a kaf to the end to make it you have. هل عندك أخ, brother, أو or أخت. هل عندك أخ أو أخت في in, here's the new word that we did, the same. نفس plus the word ألف لام on the next word, that's what means the same. في نفس الجامعة. هل عندك أخ أو أخت في نفس الجامعة. هل عندك أخ أو أخت في نفس الجامعة? Okay, which city do you live in? Here's your clue. You want to rephrase it so that the preposition is first. So pause the video. Okay, so the preposition here is in. That in has to go at the beginning of the sentence so that it's in which city do you live. So في أي, we're going to start with في أي. في أي مدينة, in which city تسكن, you live. If you're talking to a woman, في أي مدينة تسكنين, add the ياء نون at the end. Okay. So that's the end of this lesson. We have a couple of drills that we're going to be doing to practice the question articles.